Canadian schools are validating and proliferating a malignant social contagion plaguing the country's youth, and at-risk children across the country are being misled down a dangerous path of bodily destruction at the hands of Canadian social systems, and their parents risk jail time if they object. Tamara Ugolini here with Rebel News, showing you that even the Public Health Agency of Canada is promoting parental alienation when it comes to gender ideology. The agency has put out a Q&A for gender identity in schools, buried under reports and publications on sexually transmitted infections in Canada. The report is titled, "What Do I Do If a Student Disclosed a Gender Variant Identity to Me?" Do not talk to anyone about their identity, including parents/caregivers to whom they have not already disclosed their gender identity, the document states. This skirting of parental oversight is to encourage trust and confidentiality of the gender variant youth. It is important not to involve the parents/caregivers of gender variant youth unless the youth themselves have already disclosed their gender identity to their families, or you have a legal duty to report such, as is the case of risk of self-harm, it further reads. The report instructs schools to become actively involved in the creation of a safe space for gender variant youth. Schools can do this by providing inclusive sexual health education programming and organize guest speakers at school assemblies who are gender variant, while showing films about gender identity issues in the classroom, ensuring that there is literature in the school library related to gender identity. Schools are urged to implement policies against violence and harassment of gender variant individuals. By adding gender identity to the school's non-discrimination policies, gender variant individuals will be given legal recourse if they have been bullied or victimized, the report reads. Oddly, in a report published by the Public Health Agency of Canada in 2020, titled "The Health of Canadian Youth: Findings from the Health Behavior in School-Aged Children Study," they surveilled Canadian students in grades 6 to 10 and broke them down by, get this, gender and grade. Here's what they said about the response to the question, "Are you male, female, or neither? Term describes me." Students were asked to respond to the question, "Are you male or female?" by selecting from the three responses, male, female, or neither term describes me. Students who indicated that neither term describes them did not comprise a large enough group to report on by grade level while ensuring respondent confidentiality. This group of students, along with those who chose not to respond to the question, are included in the graphs that do not break down student responses by gender. So basically, it was statistically insignificant, and yet we're all expected to acquiesce to and promote the radical, progressive, all-encompassing idea of gender identity. This is still despite the fact that gender services for referrals for hormone therapy have more than tripled in youth under the age of 16 since 2016. And school boards, along with schools, further affirm this gender dysphoria, also largely unbeknownst to parents and guardians. One parent is quoted in this National Post article as saying, "The way that I see it, the schools are triangulating the family. They're becoming a wedge between the child and parent." This is a mother of a teenage girl whose Ontario school is located within the Hamilton-Wentworth Board that immediately implemented a name change when the girl began identifying as a boy. It's not a benign act. It's a psychological intervention, and it's not a minor psychological intervention that teachers and counselors are entering into without any psychological training at all. Various school boards and education ministries confirm that they will validate and reinforce the idea of a student's gender identity differing from their biological sex without consulting the parents. One such regulation, titled Gender Identity and Expression Student Records, was implemented by the Greater Essex County District School Board in June of 2021. Under privacy, it reads, "All students have a right to privacy. School staff must keep a student's gender identity, gender diverse, or transgender status confidential and not disclose it to others unless there is a specific necessity to do so. That is consistent with the accommodation process. Consent must be sought from the students and their parents/guardians as appropriate prior to the further sharing of information in fulfilling accommodations. There may be circumstances in which this student seeking accommodation is not open about their gender identity at home. A school should never disclose a student's gender identity, chosen name, and/or pronouns to the student's parents/guardians without the student's explicit prior consent. When contacting home, the student should be consulted first to determine an appropriate way to reference the student's gender identity, chosen name, and/or pronouns. This is true regardless of the age of the student. And parents must acquiesce to this ideation, or they could face jail time, like the one BC father who was not allowed to speak out against his child's medical transition. And to add to the illegality of the gender identity criticisms, as of January 2022, adjustments to Canada's criminal code now mean that it is illegal for parents not to automatically affirm their adolescent's new and budding identity.
Liberals and Conservatives actually hugging after MPs voted unanimously to ban conversion therapy, a rare moment in Canadian parliamentary history.
But keeping this from parents is dangerous. Many apparently care about the suicide rates plaguing at-risk transgender and gender-diverse youth. So wouldn't it be in the best interest of the child to alert the parents of this possibility so that they can be on the lookout for red flag behaviors and certain ideations? Due to the nature of this ideology being so new, the phenomenon of detransitioning is just beginning to trickle out. Like Chloe Cole, who began chemically transitioning at the impressionable and immature age of 13 and had her budding breasts removed by the time she was only 15 years old. She now regrets all of it, but will suffer the health harms for the rest of her life as a result.
I didn't even know the word detransition until it happened to me. But they also told my parents that if I wasn't allowed to transition, then I would be at risk of committing suicide.
And even though the Public Health Agency of Canada uses that term gender variant to refer to this as the contagion that it is, real harms are being entirely ignored or swept under the rug, while parents who can more adequately weigh the risk versus the benefit are being intentionally left in the dark as the radical ideologies are propagated in Canada's socialized medical and educational systems. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. If you'd like to learn more about gender ideology and how it's affecting women in sport, then you can do so at unsporting.com and order your copy of the book authored by Canadian track champion Linda Blade and renowned National Post columnist Barbara Kay there. That's unsporting.com.